Good morning, Logan. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm good, man.
Well, by the looks of things, it seems like the last episode resonated. People seem to be interested with the, what was it, Demons in the Forest episode?
Yep, that's right.
I got an update from that episode real quick. Remember we were talking about Riley Strain, the college boy that was the college-aged man that was missing from Nashville, Tennessee, there for his, we detailed it. Well, this week, I was looking at the news out of Nashville, and they came out with a little blurb saying that they're going to redo the autopsy and kind of go a little bit more in detail with it. I think they're going to, I don't know where they're going to send his remains to go get autopsied, but it's going to be done because they did not find a significant amount of water that would lead to drowning in his lungs.
And what do you remember? What the original cause of death was? Was it drowning?
Well, they said it was they suspected it was like suspected drowning. So when they did the autopsy, it can't be suspected drowning if there's not enough. If there's only just a few drops of water in one's lungs. Right. Yeah. So remember, it goes back to those data points we were looking at that a lot of these college-age males that are missing in urban environments, when they're found in that body of water, because remember, that's a data point that's always connected to these missing males that makes it the anomaly. When they find them in the water, very few have enough water in the lungs for drowning to be the cause of
And
death.
you think that's why they're undetermined in the cause of death most of the time?
Most of the time when it's undetermined like that, the toxology didn't reveal anything. There was no heart attack. There was no aneurysm spotted. There's just, we don't know why.
Definitely not obvious, whatever it was.
We don't know why this 23, 24-year-old healthy, college-educated young man is dead, but here he is.
Well, it's either unclear or it's what's the word? It's not public ready.
Well, I wasn't even thinking that when I read the article.
Yeah.
But yeah, that could definitely be it. So I thought that the listeners might want to know that they did see that there's no water. And that just kind of goes along with another data point that's really consistent with these young males that are missing in urban environments. So thought we could start off with that as an update from the last show because it just came in the time between filming the last two.
We definitely need to keep track of that and what they actually see when they try again. Hopefully they get something good.
I'm keeping up with this one because it's like really fresh and it's not something that Pallades already investigated and put his findings out there. This is something that's fresh for everybody to follow, and I'm very curious to find out what he puts out. I'm sure he's already gathered as much information as he can. I'd be real curious to see where he thinks this is going. But last time in that episode, we finished off and we kind of alluded to the fact that maybe the abnormally high amount of people that are missing from national parks and forests could be, what do we say, supernatural related? Could it be extra dimensional beings that we call them, what other people call them, aliens? And I kind of threw it out there that there's a conspiracy theory that President Eisenhower made a deathbed confession. Remember that?
Mm-hmm. So,
since the last time we met, did a lot of digging to see if there's see if there's anything that we could, if it's a trail worth walking down, or is it something we just need to put to bed and start looking for other avenues to pursue to try to determine why all these people could be missing. So what if I told you that I have discovered some data points and some evidence that I believe for me, and I'm going to lay the evidence and data points down to you and the viewers that could really point conclusively that Eisenhower did in fact meet what he thought was an alien, what we would call an extra dimensional being. And when I say being, I really should say beings, plural. What if I told you that about 7 aliens approached the president and another gentleman, a test pilot, at an Air Force base in California after they landed 5 crafts? 3 looked one way and 2 looked totally different. And what if I told you there's data that kind of points to that. There's evidence that points that this really happened. What if I told you that there's strong evidence, I would say a very strong fact pattern, that President Truman, President Kennedy, President Nixon, along with President Eisenhower, touched, handled, saw firsthand alien extra-dimensional craft that was here and gone, that they are, in fact, crash samples at several Air Force bases spread out through the United States for security reasons, and more than one president has met with aliens and entered into a treaty.
I would tell you to give me a lot of evidence, because that is that's a lot. If that's even vaguely possible to me, that's a little scary.
Okay, what if I told you that I see some data points that can provide, probably these data points may lead us to the high number of abductions from national parks, and we're going to look at the treaty and all that and kind of look at it. What if I told you that at one time I was really a skeptic on Eisenhower? I don't want to say a skeptic. It could have happened. His deathbed confession with his family around him. He throws out a deathbed confession. I thought it was a cool conspiracy theory back when I heard it, 20 years ago. I never was going to spend time pursuing it to see. I just thought, yeah, it could happen. I just put it up in this is the way I like to look. If that could happen, I don't see that ever happening in the world. And that whole conspiracy theory of Eisenhower giving a deathbed confession or a proclamation to his family, I put somewhere in the middle between nah and could be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
So then as I started thinking, as we started talking about this, and as the viewer who sent in and said, hey, will you check out the missing, these numbers of missing people and their demons high, the whole episode, it made me start to rethink some things and really just said, look, I'm going to spend some time, I'm going to block out some time during the day and really try to figure out what I can find by looking through some National Archive stuff, looking at some people who already wrote some books on the subject matter and see what we can come up with. So I want to say this before we get going on the deathbed confession. As a former investigator, dying declarations are what they're called. Mm-hmm. Like if you get shot and you're dying and you know who did it and you can say Bob Smith did it, then we're going to really look at Bob Smith doing it, and that's admissible in evidence because it's a dying declaration. Mm-hmm. Dying declarations hold a high value investigatively and within the criminal justice system. So what you got to understand about a dying declaration, most people aren't going to sit there on their deathbed and make up stuff. They're not going to sit there and say things that would put their family in jeopardy for the most part. I mean, loving people aren't going to do that. Sully their reputation. Most of the time, a dying declaration that's not confessing to a crime is to get something off of their chest because they know that they're getting ready to meet their maker. And they're wanting to wipe the slate clean. So you got to ask yourself, as we go into this topic today, why would President Eisenhower, and we're going to give a little bit of history about him so you can see the kind of man he was, need to clear his conscience on meeting with extra-dimensional beings? Because
his family.
To his family. So I would think that that's the kind of mindset you need to look at this. That's the prism you need to kind of come at this through. So some of this data points, some of this evidence that we look at can make sense to you. Because if you just take a lot of data and a lot of evidence and spread it out on the table and you're not looking at it correctly, it's just a lot of information. That's why they call it connecting the dots. And I never looked at the evidence that's been out there for a long time. I never looked at it through the prism of he's trying to clear his conscience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's trying to get something right. Incidentally, since this is the Biblical X-Files, little fast fact on President Eisenhower, which this isn't a data point that leads to credibility or not. This is a data point that's just unique. He's the only sitting president to ever be baptized by immersion while in office.
Interesting. That's a very, I would not have expected that. I didn't know that.
And it happened after the meeting, supposedly, with aliens.
Okay. Well, those data points, I mean, you said that doesn't necessarily contribute to the...
But it does.
I think it does, yeah.
It's not a data point that I would say that weights it out, but I think it's a data point that you can add to other evidence that we're going to have that kind of like, when you look, that's why I threw those two things out as our predicate before we start getting into our subject matter. Let's see what else. I got some other what if I told you before we get going. Let me see. Boom, boom. No, I'm going to save that one for the other what if I right here. I'm saving this for later because I think it might come into play.
You mean for a later episode or later in the...
Later today.
Okay.
Because I think I want to tie this in. And we'll just see. All right. So, any questions on kind of my lead up so far?
No, keep going.
All right. So let's unpack some data points and some evidence. This whole episode to me, when I was sitting there making these notes, because a lot of this stuff I don't have dialed into my memory, so I have to. So if I look down here more than normal, it's just because I want to keep it on things that I can stay factual with. I'm thinking to myself, this is preposterous. This episode's. I mean, I don't mind wearing a tin hat and having fun, but this is just bizarre and crazy. But then I thought, and I laughed, and I said, well, that's what the X-Files is about, right? Biblical X-Files is about bizarre and crazy.
Yeah, we're trying to bring the biblical to the X-Files, and that means having a certain level-headedness about Scripture, about God's optimism, but also God's warnings,
right.
and Jesus' warnings about the last days and about demons and Nephilim and all these topics. They're pretty tinfoil-ish topics in the modern world that doesn't believe in spirituality or that there is anything like an interdimensional being. Right. They may call it an alien, but that's just, again, we've said it a million times, that's just a framing thing. You're just framing it as an alien, whereas me and you, we're sitting here acting a little crazy, but it's kind of the same thing that people have already been talking about. It's just from a biblical prism. So
and it is. We're just coming at it from a different angle. So this hypothesis that we're forming on, hey, how is this? Could this directly a president or presidents meeting with extra-dimensional beings, could that be cause and effect for a high number of people missing from our national park systems currently as we live? So that's why we're here talking about this today, because this is something we need to either rule in or rule out.
Yeah.
So when I started digging and looking into this, obviously I told you I used National Archives from Eisenhower, Truman, Nixon, which is his are kind of convoluted for obvious reasons. Did a little bit into Gerald Ford and LBJ. And our next episode, I'm going to talk about some of them. We'll put on the screen some snapshots, but then the next episode, we're really going to start laying out some memos and stuff that are in the archives for people to look at. So there's a guy named Paul Blake Smith who wrote a book called The Eisenhower Close Encounters. So that's a book that I used. I have never really. He's not like a ufologist. He's not someone that I've really followed in the field over the years. So I had to vet the guy, and then I needed to get the book to read it and see how he investigates and his fact pattern. And what I like about this guy is he brings you the facts that he can try to prove, that he's vetted, that he has multiple sources on, that sort of thing. National Archives, like we use. And then when there's a gap, he will say, this is my conjecture, this is my opinion, or could it be? He doesn't web his opinion into the fact pattern to skew it a certain way. And so when anybody does that, I like to read and study their material because it adds credibility to it.
Definitely.
You know what I'm saying? So that's how we try to do it. And so just remember him. If you want to look up his book, President Eisenhower's Close Encounter, Very good book. We're going to hit some high points, but I'm not hitting all of it. He lays down good information. So how were you in school when it comes to American history?
Abysmal.
Abysmal.
So luckily, you're talking to a complete blank slate, just about when it comes to that.
Did you know what number President Eisenhower would be on our?
No clue.
Okay, all right.
He could have been the 38th.
That's close.
He could have been the 45th.
No, that's
too
not
much.
close.
That's like what, Obama.
Well, we're up here now. Yeah, so
Okay.
45 might have even been.
Trump.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so President Eisenhower, let me give you some fast facts on him. And the only reason why I want to give a little bit of pedigree information on this gentleman is to show you that he's not the kind of person that's going to sit and make up some kind of nonsense as he's dying.
I just think anybody with any level of credential probably still wouldn't, because I feel like you're in a pretty sober state of mind when you're dying, at least in his scenario when it was in a, I guess he died in the hospital, correct? So it wasn't like he was, or at home.
Yeah.
Okay. So either hospice or hospital or home, in those environments, you kind of have time to come to terms with things a little bit, I would imagine. And what you say in those last moments, I have a good feeling, regardless of your character, that's going to be a pretty sober statement.
Yeah.
Right? Like, why would you represent yourself in your last moments as like,
You don't want your family, your last moment, thinking, your last snapshot of them thinking, man, that guy's crazy.
you want them to think that you're righteous,
Right.
and you want them to think that you are trying to leave a legacy. And I think admitting to something that you've had guilt for, that you haven't been able to share for decades or however long he had that information, I think that's a very compelling point that you're making with this whole deathbed's, admission or confession.
All right, Eisenhower, he's known as Ike also. So if I say Ike, I'm not talking about Ike Turner.
I do think I remember that factoid. When you said Ike, I was like, okay. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not talking about Ike Turner, Tina Turner's old husband used to smack her around in the 70s. I'm talking about Ike, the president. Eisenhower was a West Point grad. He rose to the rank of 5-star general during World War II, and he carried the title of Supreme Allied Commander of the Expeditionary Forces Europe, which, when you think about the 5-star generals, you don't see anymore. I mean, you see a lot of 4-star generals now, and that's a very high rank, but the 5-star general being the Supreme Commander, that tells you that you've done something in your life. You just don't get that by, doing nothing. You have to show some aptitude. You have to really be the top guy to get that. Obviously, there's politics involved, but this guy was a cut above, okay? He was the 34th president of the United States, and he served 2 terms, and these dates are important. All right, so he started his term in 1953. He followed Truman, okay? Him and Truman have a history. They didn't go to school together. They didn't come up through the ranks together. They were both in the military, but they had history as when Truman was president, as the reconstruction of Europe, and Eisenhower was playing a role in that. They became friends, even though one was a Democrat. Truman was a Democrat. Eisenhower was a Republican.
Well, times have changed.
They became really good friends over the years and stayed best of buddies, over the years. So that's something that you can see how our world has changed over the years. But 1953 to 1961, that covers the years of Truman. A lot of things happened during those years that we're going to talk about: nuclear testing, UFO sightings. He was, I just want you to know that he was a highly educated American hero and a lifelong public servant. This is the kind of guy we're dealing with a very high IQ. He was a man that would not mince his words. He wouldn't make stuff up. And he was very regimented. If anybody that knows anything about the military academies know that they just put a regiment into you. And he is very regimented his whole life. And so you got to understand that when we're looking at some of the data points. He doesn't wing it. He's not one of those guys that's going to do it by the seat of his pants. With him, everything is organized, advanced, planned, and carried out exactly the way that it's supposed to be carried out. He doesn't just do things. He's not a spontaneous guy. Like, maybe, you're and Vivian spontaneous want to go to the mountains. Oh, let's just go to the mountains. I'm more of a, hey, let's plan it out. Let's make sure we got the time. Maybe you'll change when you get older. Maybe that's just a young thing. But he's not a kind of guy that's just going to go, hey, let's go do this. And the first data point that I want you to understand is going to take place on Dateline February the 19th. This is an important date, February 19th, 1954. All right, and you're going to hear February 19th several times in different years, but remember, February 19th is a very important year when you start looking at different presidencies, different presidents, same location, same date, different years. Now, you can call it a coincidence if you want to. We'll get to there in a minute. The National Archives and President Eisenhower's personal itinerary revealed that he left Washington sometime around February 17th. It was not announced. It was his book. You could go as a journalist and look and find out his advanced trips months in advance. All of a sudden, this week was open for months and months, and all of a sudden, at the last minute, and when I say last minute, we're talking that day, bam, onto the calendar goes a trip to California, which most people would say, presidents do that. Yeah, but for this guy, it's a little bit different because travel wasn't like it is now, and the world seemed smaller maybe back then. And for him to just out of the blue, plan a golf trip to California without advanced planning was a little weird. All right, now, you got to understand this about Eisenhower. His nickname was the Commander in Golf. Okay? To this day, President Eisenhower holds the records for the most golf rounds played during his presidency.
I don't know if that's a good fact or a bad fact. It's a fun fact.
It's a fun fact.
Yeah.
He played over 800 rounds of golf, which averages out to about 2 rounds a week while he was president.
Okay, that's not a good fact for me. It's fun, but it's not.
But he would conduct business on the golf course. But I want you to know, golf plays a key role in determining some of the stuff that we're looking at.
Sure, I could see that.
And so I want you to understand, when we start talking about golf courses and preference and stuff like that, it can add to a data point. And that's why I'm talking about golf here. So his unexpected trip to California, to me, is very peculiar, and it's because he's such a regimented man. And at the last minute, it's like he wakes up one morning and says, hey, grab the guys, we're going to California to play golf. All right, let's go. And so, but here's the thing. He never went to California spontaneously before in his life. If he played golf, and he played all the time, he played at this place right here where the Masters is played, Augusta National in Georgia, when he ventured away from Washington, D.C. You're not a golfer, but Ben Hogan, who is a well-known golfer, record setter, was a big golf buddy of President Eisenhower. There is a Eisenhower cabin on the grounds of Augusta National today that one of the members built for him because he came there and golfed so much.
I was about to say, he's there so often. Yeah, he needed that.
He needed his own place. So whenever he would go to play golf, and it was never really spontaneous, like, I'm going to wake up today and go fly down to Georgia and play golf and come home. He would do that from time to time, but it was planned. It was advanced planned. So for him to jump up and go to a desert golf course in the 1950s is a strange thing indeed, because golf courses were not that nice in the 50s in the desert. Bob Hope would have a Pro-Am, a course in Palm Springs, but most of the pro golfers in the 50s didn't like playing it because they liked playing it because they liked Bob Hope, but the golf course was kind of ratty. 2 golf courses in Palm Springs in the 50s, and I would say that there's some here in Greenville that would be way better than those back then. So as an avid golfer, a president who has the means to go play golf wherever he wants to in the United States, nobody's going to really tell him no. Why would you get in an airplane, fly all the way across the country, and play a rat hole golf course
On a whim?
Does that ring for an avid golfer? I think that's something we need to keep in mind as we're looking through our evidence and our data points. This golf trip hastily put together the week of the 19th of February 1954 a lot of ufologists, a lot of people who've investigated this over the years say it smells like a cover-up story. Everybody in America, when they get up in the morning, because they didn't have Twitter or Facebook and all that, and he wasn't, I guarantee you, Eisenhower, even today, I don't think he's the kind of guy that would have been on X, or formerly known as Twitter, saying, hey, I'm heading out to California, Palm Springs to play golf today, and then berate somebody, So
yeah, that's the X formula.
Yeah. So that as a president, he wouldn't be doing that. But when you get up and read the paper in the morning and you see, well, there goes Ike. He's going out to play golf again. Go figure. Boy, I like to have his job. I play golf all the time. Nobody would have given it a second thought. Perfect cover story. So the data point here reveals that he left and they landed sometime around the 17th in California, 1954. Golf courses located in Palm Springs, you had two, and the data point reveals that Eisenhower played 9 holes of golf, which is not normal for him. He plays 18. On February the 18th with Ben Hogan at the Tarnrisk Country Club in Palm Springs. Now, it should be noted for those people who know about this or are going to vet it, he did buy a house there after he was in office, Elnis Golf Course, and would visit there. And you will see why he visited Palm Springs and maybe wanted to have a residence there I think that this is a data point that needs to be looked at because he's from Texas originally, and he vacationed mostly on the East Coast where he liked the golf courses and down in Texas, and you could say Florida. So he was not one to venture out west that much, but him and his wife did buy a home later on this very golf course that he's golfing at on the 18th. So as an avid golfer, if he was going to take a trip to golf, he would always go to the Masters. You call it Augusta National. He'd go to the Masters. So buying a house on the West Coast is weird, even though he had his own cabin out there. I just find that weird. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a bit bizarre. I mean, I don't know what to make of that, but it is a little fishy.
So, all right. Data point. No records can be found of Eisenhower playing golf anywhere in California, let alone Palm Springs on the 19th. Remember, I told you the 19th is an important day. Now, it is reported, not in congressional archive, not in Eisenhower's archives. It is reported through other sources like people that lived in Palm Springs. When this was investigated later, people that worked at the golf course said that on the 19th, that, and it written in the margins of his personal journal as almost like an afterthought. It said lunch Thunderbird. All right, so the other golf course in Palm Springs is the Thunderbird Country Club. And on the 19th, he went there supposedly and ate lunch and then left, but no round of golf was played at all.
He went to a different golf course to eat?
Went to a different golf course to eat, didn't play golf. Now this is something important when you read his memoirs and his daily diaries of what he would do. He would go on golf trips, and this is how his normal day would work. On a golf trip, he would get up first thing in the morning, and he would call DC. He would talk on a secure line. He would read the reports that came in over cable, and then he would look and see what he needed to take care of immediately. And then once he took care of immediate business, he would make a few phone calls, and then head out, eat breakfast, head out to the golf course, play 18 holes, take him a nice lunch on his lunch break during his golf, and he'd make it back generally around 3:30, sometimes 4 to where he's staying. And then he would work till about 7 or 8 o'clock at night on government business. And then he would retire, have a few drinks, eat, and go to bed. So that was on his golf trips. They were working vacations, but it always started with work, had golf, but never like go to the country club and eat lunch. That's another strange Now him playing different courses in the area that had nice golf courses is not that strange, but him going to a golf course and just eating lunch on a golf trip and not playing a round of golf is very strange, because if he took time to leave DC 4 days to play golf, then he's going to play as many rounds of golf as he can during that time frame.
He's got to keep that stat up where he's the most number one most golf.
When you're striving for that, you don't have time for just going and eating lunch at a country club that's not really known for their food. So I think that's a data point that we need to look at. So just to throw in there that he was there in the area, but he was not playing golf on the 19th. Now, here's some data points that you got to listen to and ask questions about, and it has to do with the place called Edwards Air Force Base. Edwards Air Force Base is about 100 miles from where Eisenhower was playing golf on the night, supposedly on the 19th, where he was staying, where he played golf the day before. But it's only a short helicopter ride and an even shorter airplane ride from Palm Springs to Edwards Air Force Base. And later on, you'll see that he goes, as in Eisenhower, will take trips to Palm Springs and take helicopter or airplane rides into Edwards Air Force Base quite often. So it's not a stretch to think he's not going to fly to an Air Force base, because obviously presidents like to go to military bases and visit. So there's no record of him flying on that day, and we'll talk about it. But from his archives on the 19th, the night in question, there is record of him flying, but it's not to Edwards Air Force Base. But there's a record of him getting on a helicopter. So let me talk about Edwards Air Force Base. I don't want to jump ahead. Edwards Air Force Base is very close proximity helicopter, or you could say airplane ride. Here's the data point that we got to understand to start tying some of this stuff together, because right now I'm just throwing down evidence. We got to start stringing this stuff together. Under the Truman administration, which was before Eisenhower, Edwards Air Force Base was set aside to be the site of a clandestine military operation. On Edwards Air Force Base, there were these huge satellites set up, pointing into outer space, sending high-frequency messages through different means. I don't understand what they were doing. I just know that this was there to make contact with extraterrestrials. Not only did they have 3 huge satellites aiming into outer space, deep space, throwing out signals that they thought that an extraterrestrial could pick up on and understand, they also built a huge concrete landing pad for any they call them alien aircraft, UFOs. We call them extra-dimensional, to land on safely. And a hangar was constructed near the satellites, within 100 yards of the landing pad, just in case contact is ever made. Now, is that weird?
That's weird. So did they say that was the intent of that construction for that?
Yes, not then. Now, after things have been, over the years, yes, there's definite. You can go look in archives. You can go to the website that I was telling you about before, the anomaly, blah, blah, just type in UFO government and it'll take you straight to that website. You can punch in Edwards Air Force Base, clandestine, and this stuff will come up for you. Okay. You can even find it in the National Archives. You can if you just Google it, you're going to find a plethora of information on this that is verified. So you had this clandestine operation going on to make contact. Started with Truman. Eisenhower kept it going through his administration as you look through time. And it went through several presidents. Here's something that I think is a cool data point that needs to be mentioned. During World War II, you can Google this and find it out. Eisenhower and Churchill are flying back to England from the front lines. And as they're flying in their military aircraft, a UFO comes along beside them and starts to do acrobats and starts to do things that defy the laws of physics. Winston Churchill and Eisenhower are kind of dumbfounded by this, and they talk to the pilot. The pilot kind of moves and does some evasive thing, leaves as quick as it showed up. This UFO, it left. Now this is what Churchill and Eisenhower talked about. They is this German technology? Are the Germans toying with this, or is this something entirely different? We cannot let this out, because if it's German technology, it's going to be something that's going to turn the tide in the war right when we're starting to gain the advantage. Mm-hmm. Is this a psyops by them? Or is something from another galaxy trying to make contact with us? They made a pact they would never speak of it till they died. They swore, the Air Force pilots and everybody on board that saw it, if you speak of anything, you can die a death of treason or whatever. In fact, when they would meet each other again later, as they would often do, they would kind of smile at each other, kind of nod, and walk off. And Eisenhower says, "I'm pretty sure he knows what I'm thinking, but we're just not going to speak of it." And so nothing was ever, this is one of the reasons why Eisenhower probably had the most information as an early president in that 8 years on UFOs, because he saw one firsthand and it shocked him.
Yeah, I would definitely hold that in with a buddy as like an inside, not an inside joke, but kind of like if you can't talk about it and you're sworn to secrecy, but you both have that common experience, that's going to be a connection there.
Let me ask you this. Do you think some of the data points we're looking at now, before we start getting into some of the more bizarre things, deathbed confession, a clandestine operation to make contact with extraterrestrials set up by the administration before him. Remember, this is Truman was the president in the 40s when you had all the Roswell, and you start seeing plane crashes and stuff, not plane crashes. You start having UFOs crash, because Roswell's the one that gets all the attention, but there's a lot of wreckage from extra-dimensional craft that has crashed, and evidence has been gathered, and I think it's a play. I don't think they crashed. I think they crashed them on purpose to start laying down a conditioning for us, but that's for a different thought, a different day. Mm. But Truman had enough of this evidence to say, guys, figure out how to make contact with these people. So you have that. You have Eisenhower, who saw them. Okay, he saw a UFO in a very stressful situation, World War II. So these guys aren't just coming at this from a naysayer's point of view. They had firsthand. I would call that that's not like a close contact of it is a close contact, but it's not like reach out and touch someone.
Sure.
But it's enough to spark in them, And so, our government at that time believed in it enough to try to make contact.
Yeah, that's compelling in and of itself. And I think the deathbed confession already was enough for me to really open my eyes to the whole idea. But those other kind of smaller data points that are still relevant, I think are relevant enough to really create a pattern here.
I think
something is weird. Yeah.
I think there's something weird going on. So let's go back to 19th February. You got me up early in the morning. I got to drink coffee. All right. So they are having dinner at this hotel. And as the record goes, Eisenhower breaks a tooth off on a chicken wing bone. All right. It starts to, I guess, become excruciatingly painful. And sometime around, 9, 10 o'clock in the evening, he boards a helicopter and flies away for emergency dental work on the night of the 19th. Now, People who were at the dinner do not report him breaking his tooth off eating a chicken bone. Now, I guess you could bite into a chicken bone, break your tooth, and not let the people around the table know that you did that. But I'm not the kind of guy. If I break my tooth off eating a chicken bone, trust me, you're going to know.
Well, if it's an emergency dental surgery or what have you, that's serious enough to, I mean, it's one thing to chip a tooth. It's another thing, you said it, basically he said that he
broke it
off, basically.
Yeah, well, there's a little chip.
Out of his mouth.
It was the damage, according to records, to his tooth were substantial enough that he couldn't just go find a traveling dentist with him, maybe, or anything. He had to get on a helicopter and fly away to get emergency dental surgery in California.
Emergency dental surgery sounds like a sorry excuse for like a kid to use to get out of school or something. That's just clearly made up. That doesn't sound right to me.
Well, it doesn't sound right to me either. Now, this is what we have. Helicopter flies away. Witnesses say they see him board a helicopter and it flies away at nighttime. And it comes back early morning hours, like 2 or 3 in the morning. He gets off, goes to bed, gets up the next day, and eats breakfast. You know, I think if I broke my tooth and I went and had emergency surgery on my mouth, I'm not going to be getting up in the morning and having ham and eggs. Mm-mm. Maybe he's just one tough hombre. You know, I don't know. Maybe he's the Chuck Norris before Chuck Norris was around. I don't know. You know, maybe we should be doing Eisenhower jokes instead of Chuck Norris jokes.
I guess so.
So he the night of February 19th, 1954 is cloaked in mystery. To add to that mystery, 15 years or so after the fact, a log was discovered in some file boxes on Edwards Air Force Base that pertained to the clandestine operation that was going on. Now, what happened to it? It shut down and probably broke off into some other clandestine, try to reach people operations that were happening in different parts of our country. But in this file box, dateline 19 February 1954, reveals a helicopter with the president landed at the clandestine location, was on the ground for approximately 3.5 hours, and flew away. Now, keep in mind, congressional records and archives do not report that helicopter going anywhere near Edwards Air Force Base. Mm. But Edwards Air Force, now, here's the thing. You got to understand, a photocopy of that, I can't verify it. I'm not the one who pulled it out of a box. I'm not the one who found it. I cannot tell you that it's a fact. I can only tell you that there is if it's forged, it's a very good forgery. And why would somebody forge it? Maybe just to push a conspiracy theory. I don't know. But I'm just saying it's out there that there's a unofficial report, like a logsman would keep at the gates, sentry duty, then they just fill them out and then they just throw them in a thing because they're never going to be used probably. That didn't get destroyed, got overlooked, didn't get shredded, didn't get burned, and there it is. Is it real? I don't know. But it does say that he was there, so I just want to put that out there so people can't say that I just want to be honest. I don't know if it's real or not. Some of the stuff that I'm telling you can pull up from archives and snapshots from diaries and all that stuff. But this one here, I just don't know. But it's out there. So, clandestine hangar, California. This is what we know. Edwards Air Force Base is the home of a clandestine operation to make contact with extraterrestrial beings. That's a fact. Palm Springs is a hop and a skip and a jump from Edwards Air Force Base. Eisenhower has traveled extensively to Edwards Air Force Base. You can find in his records that he was there many times after the 19th of February 1954. And before, there was one spot before that, because he's only been in office like a year and a half up to this point. He has already logged a visit to Edwards Air Force Base, probably to see this clandestine operation that's taking place, being, as you would say, read in on it. He was definitely in California on the 19th, playing one round of golf on a 3 or 4 day visit, which is not normal for him. So those are all facts, all right? So I think you might have some smoke going here, all right? So the data point that I want to talk to you about now, and look, I even hate to bring it up. I mean, don't laugh at me. Don't run me out of the room. If people that watch this episode don't at least laugh at this, get on there and take the time to put a smiley face in at this, then I don't know what to think, because I'm going to give a data point from the National Enquirer.
Please. I'm very fascinated about this one.
Now look, the National Enquirer is not known as one of the most reliable journalistic sources that are out there.
I would imagine more reliable than some.
Well, it's a tabloid, but you have to understand this. The National Enquirer, over the years, they have broke some really incredible stories that most people laughed and scoffed at, and then they were later found to be proven true. They can't be any worse than what the garbage we have flowing through our social media stinks. Yeah. So, and I look at the National Enquirer as the eat fish approach. Now, if you don't know, familiar with that little saying, let me explain. Do you eat the bones when you eat fish? You spit out the bone, right? So you take what's good and you spit out what's bad. With any publication, you can do that with. You can do the eat fish approach. So with the National Enquirer, because the guy, Blake, that was his name, the guy who wrote Close Encounter, Eisenhower's Close Encounter, really uses several National Enquirer articles, and he took those and used them as his outline, and then just really took them and really investigated them and a more thorough investigative approach, because there's a lot more resources at his disposal now than what I don't even know if you could internet in 1982. There wasn't a lot going on. I mean, we wore weird. They girls had big hair, and we wore short shorts on the basketball court. It was a weird time. I'm a child of the 80s, so I'm glad I was. But the National Enquirer reports this. The Eisenhower, and this is based on an eyewitness. I'm going to get into him. He's known as the test pilot. And this test pilot, let's go ahead and say it now and skip it later. This test pilot came forward to the National Enquirer with this story in 1982 because he was there. He's the last sole survivor of the meeting with the aliens on February 19th, 1954. And he told them straight up, he goes, the reason why I'm here is because everybody else has died. I'm the only one left, and I'm dying. I have a terminal disease. This is who I am. So what he did is he showed them proof that he was, in fact, a Air Force officer, highly decorated test pilot, and that he was assigned to Edwards Air Force Base in the 50s, and that he worked in this clandestine operation. And he said, please don't use my name, but here's my credentials. Some people are going to know who I am, and some aren't, but I don't want my family, I don't want other people really knowing, because there were 5 of us test pilots or more. I forget the number of test pilots that were assigned, so I could be one of many. So they're not going to know it's me. They can just know it's possibility.
Yeah.
But at the time, he was just kind of the lone survivor. So they went ahead and took his story. And this is what he reports. He reports that on February 19th, 1954, he was accompanied by several Secret Service agents. He doesn't know their name. Several high-ranking Air Force officers, the rank of general or above, that he's not going to give their name. An unknown individual and that's ambiguous. We're going to talk about that as we close out. The president himself, and then they bring in this test pilot. So the test pilot he was asked, why were you brought in? You're not a general at the time. And he said, I was brought in, if this is really going to go down, if they're reading the reports correctly from the satellite, and that they're really going to land at this particular time, they wanted me there to assess the flight capabilities and see if I can go look at it, touch it, see it, go walk inside of it.
I'd almost call that a sacrificial lamb in the name of research and science in our military, because that sounds a bit like a low rank guy here. Go touch the boat.
These guys probably aren't low ranking. Let me tell you what a test pilot is. Anybody that's going to go to the moon, or try to go in a rocket ship and you got to be just different.
Yeah.
And so any test pilot that's going to say, I'll test that airplane, either they're overconfident, which you got to have confidence to get into a plane and fly it if you don't know if it's going to the capabilities of it.
Yeah.
Or you just plain crazy, or a combination of both. But these guys have stones. I mean, these guys are just cut from a different cloth. And so this guy's like, heck yeah, I'll do it. I'll try it. So he goes, and so he says that evening they enter into this hangar that's out there next. He said, which is a hangar. He said, even though he's a part of the program, is not a hangar that a lot of people go into, because it's only there for if they could bring those craft in and keep them. Keep them from satellites, keep people from seeing them, whatever. That's why it was there. And for a meeting like this, they didn't really know what they were making it for. They never knew it really happened. So he said, so we go in, and he said the Secret Service talk to the president, talk to this unknown guy, talk to the generals. They read the report, and only two go forward to the front of all the other men are standing back within eye shot, but not earshot. And it's President Eisenhower and this test pilot standing at the bay door, looking at the tarmac, so to speak, this landing pad. And he said, when all of a sudden, unlike anything you've ever seen, 5 ships appear out of nowhere, no sound, no light. They just appear and land, bam. And he said right then he was like, now this is real. This is happening, and I'm ill prepared. And so he said that they were 3, he said what we would call flying saucer, round disc-like craft, but not wonky like flying saucers you see in the comic books. He said very sophisticated spheres of different sizes. And he said, and then he goes, what was shocking was the 2 long cigar-shaped alien aircraft that landed. Now, what I find as I was searching, as I'm reading this, the cigar-shaped UFOs and the V-shaped UFOs are something that's just really came on the scene probably in the last 20 years. This guy's reporting these cigar-shaped UFOs really long before they were being spotted and videoed and talked about within the ufology community. So I find that very, very interesting. Mm-hmm. He says these aliens get out, 7, 8 of them walk in a V formation with one guy with one gray alien in the front, which is obvious the leader because he's standing 4 or 5 feet in front of them, and they're walking out in a wedge formation, which he thinks is some sort of their defense way. We walk in different formations. We kind of circle our VIP when we're moving. We'll have them circled where they're behind them flanking, but he said it's a flanking move. When you think about it, they're all moving at the same time. I don't know if they're going to come around and surround them if something goes wrong. They stop maybe 100 yards back, and this one just walks straight up, just like they were told was going to happen, and they start talking. And so this is what's bizarre. He says that they start talking, and let me get these notes correct. I don't want to miss this. He said that all right, here it is, because this is important. This is some stuff that if this is actually true, which I think this probably happened, we'll be discussing down the road. So this alien, who's the leader of this group, told Eisenhower, we're here to observe, we're here to collect, We're here to provide you important information to help your life, and we're here to give you one order. And so the test pilot said he felt like he needed to take a few steps back because he's not there to negotiate. He's there to just look at craft. But he said, I'm still within earshot. And so the order, he said, from what I could gather from the order that this alien was given, he was given the United States an ultimatum to stop testing nuclear weapons. He said, this is important to note. And I find it important to note because Eisenhower is one of the presidents that did the most nuclear testing of anyone in our history. At the time of this supposed, they're testing in the air, they're testing underground, they're testing above ground, and they're testing nukes in the water. And now if you study this, if you ever go Google, you'll see that there's reports of UFOs after this, years after this, going over our installations where we store our nukes, and things start happening. They shut down. There's lieutenants, captains from the Air Force that have reported UFO sightings in the area over the silos, over the missile silos in the Midwest, and then all of a sudden, everything shuts down.
As in like a EMP type attack? Where
yes, but nothing, and this happened, Russia reports the same thing, where they shut down. But that one anomaly with Russia, they reported that this extra-dimensional craft comes over their launch site and then puts everything into launch sequence. And they couldn't stop it on their own. And then all of a sudden, when it gets down to the end, it just stopped and flies away.
When was this?
In the 50s and 60s. You can Google them. Google UFOs, nuclear silos, and just watch the stuff come in.
Wow.
What is that? Now, I will have to admit, I was bouncing this off my wife because I like to just get her response because she's a little more intelligent than I am. And her big thing was, why they care about nukes?
Yeah. Why is that a threat to them if they're that advanced?
Yeah. So that's something that she didn't pop that on me until a few hours ago. But why would they? You know, what's the...
Do you have any immediate thoughts on that?
Two things that I come up with just off the top of my head, just off the cuff, and I haven't really thought them through. So if they sound ridiculous, I would ask the viewer, if you have an idea on why an extra-dimensional being would be concerned with nukes, throw an idea out there because, you know, these are just ideas. I would say that extra-dimensional beings know that they're part of Satan's plan to cover have their kingdom on earth for 7 years. And they don't want it destroyed. If anybody's going to destroy the earth, they want to do it.
Yeah, right. They want to do it their way.
Or could it be that these Nephilim beings are terrified of nuclear because they can't fight it? Their technology can stand against it to a certain point. It might be something that's met their that makes it even. You know, maybe because I told you before, I believe that Nephilim maybe showed some nuclear technology way back when in antiquity, and then they realized they messed up and shouldn't have probably done that, and now it's here. For some reason, the only reason why I say that, or it could be just a big black flag operation for them where they're just messing with us thinking that we're scared of their nukes and we're not. Maybe it's just there. You know how you have all these people hating nukes too? You know, do away with nukes and all that kind of stuff. Maybe that's there to show, hey, these guys are good people. They don't want nuclear. They don't want the nukes. They're environmentalists too. I don't know. There could be many reasons. What do you say?
I mean, I think all those have some value to them, those ideas. I think especially for me, the idea that Satan's plan for his, not to use a household name, but a new world order, so to speak, that is Satan's. I would imagine he wouldn't want that to be nuked. You know, I would imagine he would want the things to be roughly the way they are now, but just with his control.
Right.
So that to me makes the most sense from the biblical kind of satanic narrative, but from a more alien kind of vague narrative as far as what they are, they're extra dimensional for sure. I would say, yeah, maybe it's possible that they're threatened by the technology, but almost find that less likely given their radical, at least alleged radical movement and gravity-defying technology. It just seems a bit like they would always be steps ahead of us, even including nukes.
Yeah,
I would think.
you would think so.
Yeah.
And the whole nuke thing is weird, but that was the one order that they gave. Was the one order. Now, I think I failed to tell you this. This guy talking to us, this test pilot, it's a dying declination too. Think when you think about it.
So he said this on his deathbed?
Well, he was terminal. He wasn't.
Okay,
He wasn't
so,
quite. He wasn't
yeah.
quite down to I'm taking my last breath.
Okay.
But he's starting to put things into focus.
Would that legally still be considered somewhat? I guess that's not technically still.
It's not technically a deathbed, but I would look at it from an investigative standpoint. If this guy's dying and he knows he's terminal and he's only got months to live, he's cleaning the slate. So maybe when he meets his maker, he doesn't have something on him.
Yeah.
Okay, so and that's going to be our final thought in a minute. No nukes. Second demand was we're going to take cattle for experimentation. The third demand, so to speak, is we're going to take humans and we're going to experiment on them. So Eisenhower, this is what's funny. Eisenhower, the negotiator, responds with, we are not going to stop testing nukes. We're in an arms race with the Soviet Union, our mortal earthly enemy. I don't know who you are. Are you my enemy or maybe you're not my enemy? You didn't come like
Guns
in
blazing.
a very aggressive way, so I think that we can work some things out. But I'm going to fight my known enemy, and I'm not going to, and I'll fight you if you come, but I have to stay ahead of my known enemy. Right now, I look at you as neutral. I'm not going to stop nukes. And there was some more talk. He said he doesn't know what was said. Then Eisenhower says, you can take cattle and you can experiment with it and you can kill it all you want. But if you're going to abduct my people, my citizens, you have to promise that you will not hurt them, kill them, and somehow make it to where they won't remember what happened. He said, because I can't go explain. He goes, I can't explain to the United States why I'm going to just abruptly stop the arms race because we're in a Cold War. I can't go and explain why all these people are missing and dead in weird ways. He goes, the cattle, nobody's going to probably notice. He said, so can we make a deal? And the alien said, yes. We're going to observe your nukes, make sure, that whatever they're going to do with that. I don't know all the conversation on that, but it was something to the effect, we're going to observe them. We're going to take your cattle. We're going to experiment on your people. We won't kill them. And the treaty was for 10 years. All right, so it was 10 years.
This was in 1950,
1954. It's for 10 years. And then they get in their helicopter and they fly away.
Or whatever the heck it was. Or are you talking about
Okay,
Eisenhower?
no, I was going to say Eisenhower did that. So then these guys go back. Now, the aliens go retreat. As soon as the deal is done, kind of, remember how we were talking about doppelgangers and we were talking about that actor that just kind of glided in? Yeah. Remember, he's kind of glided. Well, these guys, instead, they walked up. Remember, they walked up. It was almost like he said that they just went, foop, this kind of like, foop, back to their ships. And he said within 3 seconds, they were in their ship and gone. No sound, no nothing. I don't even know where they went. It was just like, bam, gone.
Oh.
And he was disappointed because he didn't get to go touch, look, fly the craft.
That was his whole purpose of being
That was his
there.
whole purpose of being there. So then he later kind of thinks about it, and his whole purpose was being there was somehow fate had a second, he was able to hear and confirm what was said. So I find it weird that Eisenhower would say, yeah, I'm not going to stop nukes, but, you can take my people. Real quick, cattle mutilations, you can trace them all the way back to the 1700s to London, England, with precision cuts, kind of the way that the cattle mutilations that we have across our ranchers in America now. What you do find interesting is if, the cattle mutilations started to increase in the 50s. But it wasn't national news yet because it was just ranchers down in Texas, Oklahoma going, what the world's going on here, man? We got some kind of chupacabra or whatever out there eating my meat and my livestock. 70s, 80s, 90s, it became a big thing to where it became all over the news. Now it's all over the internet. For a while, it was the big craze, cattle mutilations. Dr. Jacobs. Hate to always go back to Mr. Jacobs up there on the wall in the bookcase there. The ufologist / tenured professor at Temple University. Him and his colleagues believe that alien abduction started in the late 50s. Started to pick up pace in the 60s. Started to be reported in the late 60s and early 70s to people, and then what it is today, all in increasing numbers. So kind of those are data points that kind of make sense with, hey, you can do this, and then all of a sudden it starts happening, and it's prevalent in the United States at that stitch in time. Not a lot of reports about it at all. You got a stitch in time, and then bam, it just starts just little increments more
Well,
and
I'm
more.
kind of surprised it was a 10-year treaty. That detail's a bit strange for me. Like, why did they choose to limit it to 10 years? I guess just to appease him because they didn't want him to think that they were just trying to indefinitely do this, even though it seems like they definitely just carried on after the 10 years, right?
Yeah, we don't know why, but here, let me throw this data point out to you, and then we'll be done. And I can't believe we went this long. Data points: Russia, Great Britain, China, Japan, in the 50s and 60s, all have these type of rumors and conspiracies that aliens have met with them and made demands, much like the ones that were made at the U.S. All right, data point. Former President Truman was said to be in Palm Springs on the 19th. His archives don't show it, but the mayor of Palm Springs and his journals from the past show him having lunch with former President Truman on February 19th, 1954. Could the unknown person be Truman? It's like this. If me and your buddies, and you started a program to reach people, and I become president, but it was your program that started it, don't you think I'm going to call you up, you're my friend, and say, hey, Logan,
Definitely.
get your butt to Palm Springs. Don't let anybody know. Make sure the archive people aren't knowing what's going on.
Yep.
Do whatever you got to do, and you need to be there at 10 o'clock at night because something big's going to happen.
That sounds perfectly reasonable. I mean, who else would you bring on? I mean, because if the guy who the terminally ill guy that basically gave this story, if he didn't know who that guy was, I know he wasn't super high rank, relatively speaking, but I feel like that's, if you're rolling with the president, you know, and you're the only guy with him, that's kind of okay, who is that? Like, you should know who that is. And if not, then it, like you said, he's probably a subject matter expert.
Yeah,
this whole thing.
I would think he started it. So this is the data point. The only thing I can say is there's a guy who's not Secret Service. It's just it says unknown guy. This test pot says he's an unknown man. Is he saying he's an unknown man because he figures if he says it's President Truman, maybe he didn't recognize him from the shadows. Maybe he didn't know who he was. He was just some unknown dude just sitting there in civilian clothes, off lurking in the shadows. But President Truman started this program. President Truman was in town on the 19th. At the same time, Eisenhower. You would think Eisenhower and him would have played golf together. It was like they were in town in separate parts of the town, not even acting like they saw each other.
Yeah, that's kind of suspect if that's the case.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden they're there. So I don't know if it's a data point. It could be a Jaiism. It could be both. I don't know. Now here's the thing that I want to end you with. And we'll pick back up next time. 10 years after the fact, on February the 19th, 1964, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who's the president right after John F. Kennedy was assassinated, meets Eisenhower in Palm Springs.
I don't like that one bit. That's... oh, God, that gives me a weird feeling. Oh,
Now, here's
Okay.
the last thought we're going to investigate next. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about this one too the next time we meet. 20 years to the day, Richard Nixon takes a civilian to Homestead Air Force Base in Florida to view the remains of dead aliens and touch alien aircraft. And Richard Nixon was Eisenhower's vice president.
Okay, the data points are connecting for me. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll finish our stitching together of data points the next time we come, and we will let you make your conclusion, and we'll let them make their conclusion because I've already made mine.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I don't know what to say other than at a certain point, coincidence is out the window. At some point, there is a point, and I think I'm curious next time to know what that point is because it's starting to feel that way already right now. Okay.
All right. Well, the next time we meet, we'll see if we can string this together like a nice pearl necklace and come up with something.